And her theme is going to be about higher education internationalization. And kind of, I watched one of her talks she gave in Germany a couple of years ago, when she can talk about the perspective there and then talk about our perspective. So this should be an exciting day. Okay, so just to say, if you have chats, please, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll have a Q&A at the end, but we'll take questions all along too. So if you have a chat question, or even if you put up a chat and maybe, you could talk face to face or whatever, I think we can try to be flexible, but we want to, if we could hear from you, it'd be wonderful. Okay. And so this talk today stems out of a ongoing project here at PolyU. So I don't know which of you know this. So this is a project, and it's headed by MS Wong from BME, Biomedical Engineering. And they've been doing this for a while, and he has his team of Percy and Kubert. And so they have this kind of framework they've built about integrating the curricular and co-curricular strategies. And so this is a kind of an exciting project, so it'd be good to have people to work with MS and talk together with him. And let me put up a slide there. So if you do want, if you want more information, use this code, or you can contact me and I can send you to MS, or you can, I'm sure MS will be happy to deal with you directly, MS Wong at BME. Okay, so keeping that in mind though, as we build up, let's see. So that's the team there and all their work. That's the code. Okay. I switched on one screen, nothing the other, and I realized, so I'm giving you a second here. Sorry about that. Okay. And so now we're going to go on to our main talk we'll hear about our speaker. And please indulge me in my pronunciation. So we're very happy to have Dr. Carla Camargo Cassol da Silva, beautiful name. And she's an internationalization of education specialist and has a broad range of experience working in these fields. She holds a PhD in education from PUCRS in Brazil and a PhD internship program at Curtin University in Australia, and also a double master's degree in business and management at Unicinos, Brazil, sorry, and also from the University of Poitiers in France. She's an MBA in international business and runs a specialization program at Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul, and she's a researcher at the Center of Studies on Higher Education at PUCRS. Okay, and she has a lot of experience in this field, and like I just mentioned, she gave an exciting talk in Germany and other places, and she's a guest speaker and reviewer for journals and editorial boards. So we're very happy to have Dr. Cassol here. Hello, good morning. How you doing? Good afternoon.
Hi, John. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Your pronunciation was just great. Nice. Good morning for you all, and thank you very much for the participation. And I'm so happy to be here and share some of my knowledge, and of course learn from you as well, from one of my real passions, which is internationalization of education. So I would like to thank PolyU for this invitation, and of course the project team as well, and Dr. Wong especially. So I'm going to share my screen. I would like you to tell me if you can see it in presentation mode. Can you see it?
No. Yeah. Wait a second. It's coming. Okay. We're not on the full screen though. Oh, now you switch back to you. Okay.
Okay.
We
Let's
did it
do
once, so we don't have stress because we know we can do it. If I see something's done, it calms me down. I don't get as nervous if I know, well, I did it a minute ago.
Did it?
There you
Is
go.
it done?
There you go.
There we go. So my talk is about internationalization of higher education, what, why, and how. And so we are going to discuss iHub Internationalization Hub is my consultancy. And today we are going to talk, this is the agenda. We are going to focus on what is internationalization of higher education. I'm going to bring some definitions and related concepts as well. Second approach will be on why is internationalization important? First, for higher education institutions, for the students, society, and for faculty as well. And then we are going to address the topic on how to internationalize, because we know what, we already know why, and then we are going to discuss how it's going to happen or how it happens. So I'm going to bring the concept of internationalization at home, internationalization of the curriculum, and bring some practices and cases as well, because the main point would be putting theory into practice, which is our last approach. So I'm going to talk a little bit about in-kind support and resources as well. So let's talk about internationalization. The first definition I would like to bring is the definition that was described by Jay Knight in 2004, in which she says that internationalization of higher education is a process of integrating an international, intercultural, or global dimension into the purpose, functions, and delivery of tertiary or post-secondary education. So we can see here that this definition focuses on internationalization as a process. But later on, the Witt, which is an internationally recognized author and researcher in the area, he developed a revised definition, and this is the one that is quite used nowadays. And he says that internationalization of higher education is the intentional process of integrating an international, intercultural, or global dimension into the purpose, functions, and delivery of post-secondary education in order to enhance the quality of education and research for all students and staff, and to make a meaningful contribution to society. I would like to call your attention for the following: contribution to society, and then I'm going to address the points on how internationalization has developed through years, and intentional. So this is quite important to keep in mind, because when Brandenburg brings the developments in internationalization of higher education, because this is a concept, a definition in movement, we would say. We had previously individual activities. I would say that individual students or individual professors or faculty would go abroad and would have activities, projects, and individual experiences. Nowadays, what we have is a systematic, institutionalized internationalization. So higher education institutions, they consider internationalization a means to their ends. So it's part of the strategic plans of higher education institutions. And so we can say that institutions care about internationalization as a process, as a whole in the institution. Following that, we had mobility individual experience, and we moved forward to educating global citizens. Now, we just shift the focus, because we were talking about institutions, higher education institutions perspective, and now we are talking about students' perspective. So before, some years ago, mobility individual experiences, they were just growing a lot, and we had a great volume of these experiences. Nowadays, the focus of internationalization of higher education is on teaching and learning process, in a base that would provide students the opportunity to develop intercultural competencies and also an international or global perspective in order to become or be formed as global citizens. Another one that would be considered a development on the theme would be changing the focus on quantity to quality. Some time ago, it would be easy for international office to say the number of signed MOUs. So as many as possible was good. Now it is more focused on quality of these partnerships and quality of activities as well. So before it was focused on inputs and outputs. So numbers would define quality of internationalization of higher education, activities, projects, and all that. Nowadays, the focus is on outcomes and impact on students learning, on faculty development, and also on the institution's results and goals achievement. So in this development procedure, I would say, and process, we have mobility as part of the internationalization process, but we also have evolved to other concepts, and that's where we can see internationalization at home coming, and then the concept of internationalization of the curriculum. I'm going to talk about that later when I'm going to address specifically the point of teaching and learning process internationalization. But there's also a concept of comprehensive internationalization, which is when higher education institutions consider that internationalization must serve and must be connected to all services of the institution. So it's a broader view, and it's part of the institution DNA. And other related concepts that I would like to call the attention as well, connected to this new development or new approach to internationalization would be intercultural competencies, global competency, and global citizenship education. So when we talk about intercultural competencies, in a sense, they are about improve human interactions across difference, whether within a society or across borders. These definitions is from Darla Dierdorf, and it's quite used nowadays, as well as the concept of global competency, which was designed and written by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, in 2018. And they say that global competency is a multidimensional construct that requires a combination of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values successfully applied to global issues or intercultural situations. And last but not least, global citizenship education. That was a project from UNESCO. It was launched in 2015, but it's still happening. And they say that global citizenship education aims to empower learners of all ages to assume active roles, both locally and globally. And we usually say that they have to think globally, but act locally, in building more peaceful, tolerant, inclusive, and secure societies. So all these three definitions and concepts, they are interconnected with internationalization of higher education. Well, moving the approach now, we just talked about the definitions, and if you have any questions, please just write in the chat, and after we can address all of them. There's an author from the management area. His name is Simon Sinek, and he has a book that is called Start With Why. And his concept, he developed a theory, which is called the Golden Circle Theory. He says that all successful organizations they start by why. Everything that they do, everything that they propose, they start by why. And then later they discuss how, and later they discuss what. And I think it makes sense because when you think why you are doing the things you are doing, and you have a clear reason and rationale for that, you get engaged. And that's exactly what Simon Sinek says, that starting with why brings engagement. So I'm just going to bring some ideas and questions and for you to reflect and think a little bit about internationalization of higher education and how it can be applied in our world, academic world. So what's the role or purpose of higher education? What should we deliver in terms of higher education, activities, projects, classes, programs, courses? What is the higher education institution's mission? What are they for? What were they created for? And what about faculty mission? Are we supposed to teach our students how to learn, to transmit some knowledge? It's a matter of knowledge transmission. So what's my mission as professor? And what are higher education students' expectations? Because the students are stakeholders and they are part of that. So what are their aims or goals when they enroll in higher education institutions in order to have their learning path? And another question would be, what does our society need? Because that's the construction that we have to approach. So first of all, when we think about why students, the why for the students, they are usually looking for employability. And employability is quite connected to higher education sector because, for example, a student who enrolls for the medicine program, he wants to be a doctor. For law programs, for example, he wants to act in this area. So employability and its connectedness to technical and practical issues for professional development might be considered. But when we think about graduate capabilities, what competencies and capabilities should our students develop? Let's see. I bring here the Future of Jobs report from 2020 from the World Economic Forum, and they say that these are the top 10 skills for 2015. If we just take a look at this really quickly, we are going to see that we have analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, complex problem solving, leadership and social influence, resilience, stress, tolerance, and flexibility. So if we take a look at this top 10 skills, we don't see many or none technical ones. And then I ask you, are these competencies important? Effectively communicate with people from other cultural backgrounds, work with multicultural teams, ability to think globally and consider problems in diverse perspectives, capacity to professionally make use of technical world-class patterns and practices, and be engaged with global issues. So if these competencies are important, we have to consider them in our teaching and learning process and teaching and learning planning as well. We live in a global society. So I remember in the decade, last decades or 2 decades ago, Brazil had huge companies who used to import and export, and that's it. You live in Hong Kong. It's completely international. So you get people from all around the world. You have international people connected all the time, and now we have the internet as well. Well, as I've mentioned, Brazil was not international till the 80s about that, but now in our universities, inside university campus, we have tech parks. And in these tech parks, we have startups, companies that are born international. So startups, for example, they are born in an international environment, and sometimes they are functioning and working completely online and with multicultural teams and engaging people from many different countries. So this is something that we might consider when we think about graduate capabilities, because global society is not coming back to a non-global society. Now, talking on the higher education institutions perspective. So why is internationalization? Again, keeping on the why. Higher education institutions' mission, the main mission is to prepare graduates and citizens to live and work in a multicultural, interconnected world. That's it. And it's related to quality. We do know that higher education institutions, sometimes they look for, or their goals are rankings and quality assurance and all that. So in a globalized context, higher education services quality refer to internationalization. And then we have to do the best we can for internationalization to enhance institutions to achieve their goals. And that's why when I was talking about the development of internationalization process through years and all that, we could see that now we have this systematic, institutionalized internationalization. I can see that your university as well, PolyU, is interested and has in its strategic plan the point on internationalization. Because nowadays we cannot say that a higher education institution is excellent if it doesn't care if it's not internationalized in terms of research and teaching and learning process as well. So in your strategic plan, you have the enhanced internationalization and engaging the nation as a topic to be approached. I'm going to bring here another perspective from, this information was extracted from the focal group interviews conducted in 2018 with staff and students from your university. It was during the period of the past UGC-funded internationalization project. And take a look at what your students and also some faculty say about internationalization. They say that mainland Chinese students typically suffer from culture shock when they first come to Hong Kong. Another one here, it seems that in many disciplines, the focus at undergrad levels is to prepare Hong Kong students for employment in the local market. If we think that we are preparing our students to work in the local market, we are just, limiting their future. We are designing what they are going to do in the future, and they can have the opportunity to work whatever they want to. Another approach, Hong Kong students may be the ones who need to most help to broaden their global horizon, since they are reluctant to engage in international activities or to interact with non-local students. While nearly all non-local students go out of Hong Kong for internship or exchange, only about 30 to 40% of Hong Kong students do so, particularly if it does not count towards their assessment. And this is something I would like to list here. First of all, that only about 30 to 4% have this opportunity for internship or exchange. So what are we doing with the other 70%? And that it doesn't count towards their assessment. So maybe we should consider that it should count, yeah? And also that when having groups, conversation, or activities, students, they are left to form, when they are left to form their own groups, they mostly tend to form their own cultural groups. So having an internationalized campus does not mean that you have lots of international students in the campus, because sometimes they gather into groups of the same cultural background and they don't mix with the others, so they don't share the knowledge. And this is not internationalization or intercultural competency development as well. When we talk about society, internationalization is important for society in terms of, there's an author, John Elkington, and he designed and created the triple bottom line perspective. And he talks that in order to have real sustainable development, society and the world needs, first, to be economical viable. Second, social justice must be approached, and environmental correctness in terms of taking care of our environment. So these three factors affect, and if they are not developed together, we are not going to achieve a sustainable development. And so internationalization comes to society because it brings benefits for society as well. I've mentioned before, think global, act local. And now we are evolving to a new concept on internationalization of higher education. It was written by Brandenburg, which is another internationally recognized researcher on the field. And he created the concept of internationalization in higher education for society. And what we believe is that when bringing into society aspects, internationalization might approach social problems engagement in terms of developing global systems and also capacity building, because when you internationalize your curriculum, you develop international perspectives or global perspectives and intercultural competencies in your students, and you provide them this opportunity for development, then you have capacity building in your campus, in your university and city, country, and so on. And take a look. This I just bring from your government. Actually, Hong Kong government brings that Hong Kong, it's one of the aims of the government, Hong Kong as a regional education hub. So the government strives to enhance Hong Kong's status as a regional education hub through internationalization and diversification of the higher education sector. So we can see that all players and stakeholders are focusing on internationalization of education because this is quite important to develop society. And so why does it matter for faculty? Well, first of all, because it's connected to students' learning and careers as well, as we have already not discussed, but I have told you and I have already mentioned. So students' learning and careers is connected to internationalization process, higher education institutions' missions as well, global society need. So now we have to focus on teaching and learning process and developing global perspectives and intercultural competencies for all students. So I would like to ask you, if you have your cell phone, your mobile in your hand, just why internationalization matters for you. So what really matters? If you can just use that, and in the QR code here, you are going to answer why internationalization is important for you, because this is a key point to start. As I've mentioned before, if we think that why brings engagement, when you have a clear rationale on why internationalization is important for students, for institutions, for society, but mainly for you. So please, if you can go there, and then afterwards, we are going to take a look at the results, and I'm going to share that with you. So we started with why, and we discussed, and I told a lot about why internationalization is important. But second, we have to think and we have to approach how. So what internationalization means is quite clear by now, because we have already seen that. Why internationalization is important as well. I'm just curious to see why internationalization is important for you, actually. But now we are going to address the how, because most faculty, or I would say academics and even higher education institutions staff, they do know the importance of internationalization of higher education, and but sometimes it's not clear how they can do that. How can they start working with internationalization? And that's why we are going to approach that now. So let's set how. First of all, I'd like to bring you the idea. Remember that I've mentioned before that mobility is part of the internationalization process. It is, of course, an important part of the internationalization process, but it's just a part. So I bring here some data from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, now 2022, and they say that in terms of degree mobility, internationally mobile students accounts for only 5% of bachelor's students, but 14% of master's students and 24% of doctoral students on average in countries that are part of the OECD. So degree mobility students are the students that they go to another country and they have the full degree program there. And credit mobility would be the students that go abroad, but they are still enrolled in their home institution. So they go abroad to study a semester or a year, and then they come back and they are going to have their diploma from the home institution. So in terms of credit mobility, on average, across the European countries, and we do know that in Europe, there's a program called Erasmus. Erasmus is a program funded by the government, in which students, they have the financial support to go abroad, to go to other countries to study. And this is not the case in most of the countries. So in European countries, 10% of graduates had benefited from credit mobility. So as I've mentioned, what are we doing with the 90%? If we consider that internationalization is a synonym, equals mobility. So we come to the definitions of internationalization at home, and after I'm going to approach internationalization of the curriculum as well. So Billen and Jones, they have this concept that internationalization at home is the purposeful integration of international and intercultural dimensions into the formal and informal curriculum for all students within domestic learning environments. So all activities, projects, programs, courses developed within domestic learning environment that have this integration or this international and intercultural aspect are considered practices of internationalization at home. And internationalization at home excludes student mobility across borders, which is in contrast the element of curriculum internationalization. So this is important for you to know the difference. And this movement, because some people call this is a concept, but some authors and researchers, they say this is a movement, is due to that 90% of students that I've mentioned that don't have the opportunity to study abroad. And so they wouldn't have the opportunity to develop this intercultural competencies, global perspective, and all that are needed for their employability, for society, and all that. And this movement started in which higher education institutions provided activities for those students that don't have the opportunity to study abroad. And then we move forward in terms of internationalization of the curriculum definition. And Betty Lisk, I worked with her. She is the one who actually created this definition and has worked a lot on internationalization of the curriculum. She says that this is the incorporation of international, intercultural, or global dimensions into the content of the curriculum, as well as the learning outcomes, assessment tasks, teaching methods, and support services of a program of study. And when we talk about internationalization of the curriculum, we are talking about the formal curriculum in which we have graduate capabilities, and we have our planning for all the classes and courses inside the program, but also the informal curriculum that refers to all the other activities that are not part of the formal curriculum as well. And this is a matter of incorporating these perspectives into the content, into the class planning as well, the whole program planning, and also assessment of students' learning development. So we go to the internationalized curriculum definition, and here I would like to call the attention because the internationalized curriculum will be the product of the internationalization of the curriculum. So internationalization of the curriculum is a process, and the internationalized curriculum is the product. So we usually say that internationalization of the curriculum is a means to the internationalized curriculum, which is the end, but the product, because I would say that the real end is to have global citizens development. Well, we had COVID impact, and we all know that. But for internationalization of higher education sector, and not only for internationalization, but for higher education and education sector, it brought some novelty and also innovative ways to deal with online classes and virtual exchange, virtual mobility, and all that. So after this COVID pandemic that we suffered a lot, the whole world started with working online, and also teaching and learning process was online as well. And what we can see is that this is to stay, so it's not going to come back in terms of having this face-to-face integration and classes as mandatory for students. So now we have this virtual formats in the whole world, and all higher education institutions, or most of them, they have this virtual formats. And so to explore virtual mobility for students and staff must be considered for future. The COVID impact then brought virtual exchange programs, and now I'm talking about internationalization specifically, not about higher education and education sector. So we have virtual mobility. And imagine if we had only 10% of students with the possibility to go abroad, how many students of yours have mobile and internet connection? So all these students, they can have the possibility to enroll in virtual mobility programs. Another activity that raised a lot and was really successful before, but now after this virtual change or virtualization, internationalization virtualization, is PolyU, which is called Collaborative Online International Learning. It's a method, and there's a book from John Robin. He writes about PolyU and how we can have a PolyU, but it's based on problem-solved methodology in which a professor from University A with his students, his or her students, is going to develop a project with professor from International University B with his or her students as well. And they are going to engage virtually to discuss this project. They can have virtual classes, they can have discussions by forums and etc. And remote classes, and of course, the hybrid model is present as well. So teaching and learning process, the main point would be global learning for all. And that's why we have this focus on teaching and learning process when we discuss internationalization of education. And this is a matter of equality and equity, because equality is when you give people the same thing. But equity is fairness in every situation. And it's not fair for those students that don't have the possibility to go into mobility programs, not having the opportunity to develop those competencies that are required nowadays. So let's talk about the teaching and learning process. And here I bring more questions, and I would like to reflect on them. And of course, they are a little bit provoking. So when we talk about future plans, how do you plan your future? Do you just decide what you are going to do today and then you start doing tomorrow? Or you really plan your future? And here I'm talking about your personal future and professional future as well. When we were planning your career, it was like, today I just decided that I'm going to study higher education, internationalization, and that's it. Or I started this about 20 years ago, and then I started to study, and then I went to my undergrad program, and after that, my master's, and then my PhD program. So this is all calculated, right? And how do institutions plan their future? Institutions and companies as well. They have strategic plans. They usually plan their vision in terms of 5, sometimes 10 years. So vision is something that they want to achieve in the future. They define goals, and they define short-term and medium-term and long-term projects to achieve goals and to achieve vision as well. They usually have the strategic planning, and this is a whole discussion in the whole organization in which people get connected, engaged in terms of discussing what are the future plans for the institution. And how do you plan the graduate future? How do you plan your students' future? First of all, what is planned? Why is this in my class plan? Why is this in my curriculum? Why is this in my activity or project, in my teaching and learning process? Why is this content here or this reference as well? Because we are the ones who choose what our students are going to study, are going to learn, are going to read, and how they are going to be assessed by that. So we have to take a look at curriculum, class planning, activities, and I feel actually ashamed to tell you, but here in Brazil, we have some undergrad programs curriculums that were developed in the 70s, for example. We didn't have internet access at that time, and they're still working with the same curriculum till today. So reviewing curriculum is quite important from time to time. And how do you plan it? How do you plan your graduate future, your students' future as well? Is it aligned with all the discussion that we had before? Students' expectation, higher education, mission, and society needs? Well, let's think about it. In the course for which you are responsible, how clearly defined and articulated are any international or intercultural learning goals, aims, and outcomes? Just think about it. Another one, in the course for which you are responsible, to what extent do the teaching and learning arrangements encourage student engagement in intercultural interaction and international experience? To what extent do assessment tasks require your students to consider issues from a variety of cultural international perspectives? And to what extent is the content of the course or program internationalized? Well, when we consider teaching and learning process and how we plan and what we plan, we can think of different perspectives and activities and possibilities that we can approach. And this is how we can internationalize. So, of course, we have to consider students' mobility, but remember, virtual mobility and on-site mobility. Faculty mobility is also quite important because then you can bring an international invited professor to your class, and this is quite important for the students to have this international or intercultural different perspective. Consider double degree programs, but also joint curriculum development in which professor or program coordinator A can develop a curriculum together with his international partner from partner international institution, and they can design that curriculum together in order to enhance the development of the competencies. Portfolio sharing is another possibility. Short courses development, international experience, and then we have missions, internship programs as well. PolyU that I've mentioned, webinars, because now we have this virtual mode available, and it's inexpensive, and it's a great way to make students having this perspective developed as well. And use of intercultural differences or cultural background differences that you have in your classroom. Sometimes in the same classroom, you have people from different perspectives, from different cultural backgrounds, and we can stimulate our students to reflect on that and to interact as well. So now, finally, I'm going to bring some practices and some cases from other countries, and after I'm going to approach PolyU, practices and cases as well. The first one I would like to address is a course. It was a course within a program, and the title of the course was Ethics and Citizenship. And I remember I was working with the team in order to internationalize the curriculum of that program. And I remember the professor who was responsible for this specific course, he said that he could not internationalize because ethics and citizenship would be something he didn't know how to have this internationalization approach into the course. So we started discussing in the group, and the group discussion, the participants brought the idea while we were discussing to bring the perspective of global citizenship that I've just mentioned. And then they started working on that. The syllabus of the course changed, the assessment changed, and all the course, including the title, was changed to Ethics and Global Citizenship, using all the reference from UNESCO, and it was quite internationalized perspective brought into that course. Another example would be it was a collaborative online international learning in the doctorate in education at PUC Rio Grande do Sul, here in Porto Alegre. And students from the doctorate in education from PUC, they, together with their professor, of course, they wanted to approach UNESCO. UNESCO has a kind of open question. It's a survey in which they address some focal points and they ask people and institutions and organizations to answer. And it was about, the theme was about future of education. How is education going to be in 50 years? So that was the title and the question that UNESCO addressed. So this group from PUC, together with the professor, connected with another group in the higher education institutions in Uruguay, and they worked together in order to prepare and elaborate single answer. It was, of course, not only an answer, it was much bigger than that, but an answer to that call in terms of intercultural perspective, because they had to work together in a different language, because you know that in Brazil, we are in Latin America, but we are the only country that speaks Portuguese. All the other countries, Latin American countries, speak Spanish. So the group from Brazil was speaking Portuguese, the other group was speaking Spanish, but they could, engage and solving this, not a problem, but, addressing the answer for UNESCO question, and it's going to be published soon. Another one would be a double certification. It was a short course. It was designed by two professors. One of the professors, they have he had a group from engineering, and the other one from the United States, engineering as well. So they decided that they would offer as informal curriculum a short course in which they would address some common points of engineering. And so they designed the course, and then the student that would be enrolled would get this double certification. And it was so successful that now this is part of the formal curriculum. Another one was curriculum internationalization of the medical undergrad program. This is something that happened as well here in Brazil. And I worked with the medical undergrad program at PUC Rio Grande do Sul. And it was really nice because the result, the deliverable, was the internationalized curriculum. So we just had the whole process of internationalization of the curriculum, and at the end we had the product, which was the internationalized curriculum. Many discussions, talking to faculty coordinators and leaders as well of the institution in order to see how the program would be internationalized. And one of the key points I would like to address here is that we were in a group discussion with the whole faculty engaged in the program. It was a kind of a workshop. And then one of the professors was just taking a look at his plan. He was analyzing his course plan. And he said that his plan was quite international because he brought perspectives from a specific country, and it was all in English. And then I just said, well, that's international for sure, because you have this specific country approach and you bring bibliography and references in another language, which is English. But do you think this is global? Don't you think that other countries might have, might have cases to be studied in the medical area as well? Think about other possibilities. So when we talk about internationalization of the curriculum, we also talk about paradigms, and we have dominant paradigms, but we have to take a look at emerging paradigms as well. And so I remember that this professor came up with the idea that Israel, for example, is quite recognized in the medical area and medicine programs as well. So he decided to approach one of the partner institutions in Israel to develop this course. And so this perspective on, yes, it is international, but I'm focused on a specific country, specific cases, brings the idea that we have to broaden our minds. And now some practice and cases from PolyU, because yes, your university has lots of them as well. So the first one is the pre-departure preparation and co-curricular activities for students' intercultural exchange. So this enables students to discuss their common goals and expectations while exploring differences, and they are asked for practical living information and use the basic intercultural concepts in their discussion on the care of the elderly, because it was performed by the School of Nursing. Another one was internationalizing the student learning experience, biomedical engineering student project collaboration program with overseas institutions. This is from your university as well. And so this is an opportunity to select local students, and these students would take 2 credit core subjects. Of course, there was a selection process, and the selected students would have these two credit subjects, participating in a visit to the Imperial College in London. And the key impact of this program was to encourage students to pay more attention to ergonomics, cultural factors in different countries, and their effects on patient experience. I would like to call your attention to this specific case because there was a selection. So not all students had the opportunity, but when the students, the selected ones, came back, they would share their experience and knowledge with the other colleagues that didn't have the chance. So this is something that we might approach as well, because if we have 10% or 30%, which is your case, of students going abroad, when they come back, they should actually share their experiences with the others. The other case is internationalizing the student learning experience, MBA, advertising design at the School of Design. And this study, it was a project that involved internationalizing learning outcomes of 4 selected teaching subjects in BA advertising design program at your university. And the main aim was encouraging students to be part of the transformative learning experience and of internationalization of the curriculum. And this is something that we address when we develop internationalized curriculum. We bring students to the discussion because they are the ones that have their expectations, and these expectations must be met. So this is a great example of a project in which students were involved. So subject design, syllabi, and assessment of the subjects were revised with a stronger, I would say, more direct focus on internationalization. And students, inbound exchange students, international students, and visitors were engaged as well. The main result was that the students gained self-confidence as they began to communicate with the international students, and they were more willing to communicate with them using the English language. And also recognize positive aspects of cultural differences. And so this is a really good outcome. And the other one is cross-cultural and interdisciplinary studies of infrastructure projects in cities of the Belt and Road Initiative. Infrastructure projects in countries of the Belt and Road Initiative involve multidisciplinary professionals with diverse cultures, nationalities, and languages as well. So I would say that cross-cultural communication and collaborations are needed for resolving issues in these projects. And so involving students from different cultural and disciplinary backgrounds to conduct projects collaborative, and this might be a PolyU as well, was a great achievement. So because they had to discuss related issues under this initiative. And of course, the project integrated experiential teaching and learning activities, including project-based studies, workshops, and all that. So observations proved that the development of students' intercultural communication and interdisciplinary collaboration ability was successful. Students learned the significance of creating new knowledge and think deeper about their proposed topics. So we have colleagues who are working with internationalization projects and activities, and this is quite important to mention as well. So Betty Lisk, that I've mentioned, internationally recognized actor and my friend, she says that we have to bring all these students the opportunity to develop these intercultural competencies and international perspectives. So they have to be exposed to activities in order to develop these competencies that are going to be actually part of their lives as people, as persons, as professionals in this world. So from all parts of the world, as she says here, our students, they have to develop the capacity to solve tricky problems and find innovative solutions, and are committed to actions that benefit others as well as themselves. So it's not only thinking about yourself, but thinking about the other and a society as a whole. So Carla, all that you said, and it's all said, it's all done. Why internationalization is so important. So what do we do now? And so I would say it's up to you. No, actually, it's up to us. And that's exactly why we have this project. You have the resources from the project that you can just see. You have the framework for internationalization. It's an institutional framework that can be quite useful. The toolkit, reference list, activities, and you can contact us as well. The email address is over there. You can contact the team. We are going to provide you all the guidance and mentoring for developing activities and projects focused on internationalization. So now I have in 3 languages here: invitation, invitación, que es en español, convite in português. It's an invitation. After all these that we have discussed, my invitation for you is, let's be leading actors of internationalization of higher education. We do know how important it is for society, for students, for higher education institutions, and for the world in a sense. So that's the invitation that I address specifically for you. And engage with us in the project. Here's some references, and that's it. Thank you very much. Now I would like to go back to John and see if we have questions and topics to be addressed.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a good talk. Good to hear this stuff. And I could see one thing that really stuck out to me is that you showed the concentric circles, the Venn diagram. And the thing we usually call internationalization was mobility. And that was the smallest little circle. And I think that's right, though. I mean, that, when teaching about this, if we, like the question in the chat, can we have a concrete example of how the curriculum is internationalized? People have a notion of internationalization, but the different particulars, internationalization at home, internationalization of the curriculum, people have problems with that. I wonder if you could just add on to that question there about, so I think this was from, I don't think it's a secret, but the person was a teacher, not MS, but a teacher from BME, so biomedical engineering, which we have, is it's somewhat medicine and it's somewhat engineering, like the name says. And so how does this teacher, if he's going and he wants to think about internationalizing the curriculum in his own course, so what might he look out for?
Well, there's a whole process for internationalizing the curriculum, but we have to think that it's not that complex, it's not that difficult. So when you want to start internationalizing your curriculum, formal curriculum, informal curriculum, or you can also internationalize a short course, first of all, you have to analyze your program. What is written in there? What are the competencies that you are just writing that your students have to develop? And after that, you are going to look at how you are going to provide opportunities for these students to develop. So first of all, you want to, your students have to be able to interact in intercultural environments. If this is a competency that you have to develop, so you have to plan how you are going to provide the student the opportunity to do that during his learning process. And after that, you have to see how you are going to assess that as well. And then you have learning goals, you have learning outcomes, you have the learning objectives, and you are going to assess that as well. So for each learning outcome, learning goal, you have the outcomes, the assessment, and activities planned for that. You cannot ask or tell your students that they are supposed to develop intercultural competency, that they are supposed to develop a way to communicate in intercultural environments if you don't provide them this opportunity during the learning process. And so that's the first step. And of course, you are going to look at content, you are going to look at references. I remember I was working with the internationalization of the curriculum in information technology program. And during a discussion, they were just discussing about innovation and all that. And then they said they had the Silicon Valley approach. And I discussed with them that that is an international approach, but it's not global itself because, and then they agreed with me. And this is a key point as well when we talk about internationalization of the curriculum, which is dominant paradigms. You have to take a look and have this critical perspective on what you are telling your students to read, what you are telling your students to study, to do, and how you assess their knowledge and performance as well, of course.
Okay, thanks. We've done a lot of projects here in internationalization over the years, and the thing I've noted is that internationalization of the curriculum is really the good one, that because it gives you something sustainable. Right. Whereas other projects often become one-off and they're good stuff, but the teacher doesn't really have the time. So it's nice to hear that. I see we have a couple of more questions in the chat, and I'll ask the people if they'd like to say their questions instead. I think it's a better atmosphere. And I see the first question is from MS Wong, and this is his project. So I would ask MS, could you ask the question instead? I think we'd rather have a conversation than just me reading. And please,
sure,
thank
John.
you.
Yes,
and we'll get to Eric next too.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks, John and Carla. Share your experiences. Just when you share with us this mobility, student mobility. So as we are now, because of the COVID, may not be able to have the real physical student mobility, while we need to have this virtual mobility. And from your experiences or from your understandings, is there any comparisons in terms of the outcome measures for these two interventions or methods? Because some we cannot arrange real physical mobility, while for just through this virtual mobility. So any things you learn, or that some outcome comparisons among these two?
What I've heard from students, actually, in terms of virtual and face-to-face interaction on-site mobility, is that it's different, of course, because you don't leave the culture. When you travel abroad, you are going to be there 24 hours a day, and then you are going to be in that culture. So it's different, but virtual mobility brings an inclusive perspective, because then you can provide more and more students this opportunity, and they sometimes the mobility, the face-to-face interaction when you travel, it's only once. Students usually, when they have the chance to go once, it's wonderful, but usually they don't have the possibility to go twice or 3 times. So, and virtual mobility, they can have this offer, and they can have this possibility every semester. We had students from PolyU who had virtual mobility, participated and enrolled in virtual mobility programs. And they said it was a great experience, because they wouldn't have the chance to have first in their diploma, for example, this international experience and the experience itself, because they would connect, they would develop a network with students from other higher education institutions and international partners as well. And nowadays, for example, I have 2 kids. Actually, my boy, he's 21, so he's not a kid anymore. And my daughter, she's 15. They are always connected. Imagine what we are doing now. We are just discussing about internationalization. I'm not there with you. I'm not in Hong Kong. I'm here in Brazil, in Porto Alegre, and we are having this fruitful conversation on internationalization. So what students bring is that it's different, but they can develop great projects, and they have the opportunity to be at least exposed to cultural differences and international perspectives. These PolyU programs that I've mentioned as cases, they were really successful as well, and they are just continuing. And as John mentioned before, sometimes we see mobility as internationalization, but this is a short aspect, a small aspect of internationalization, and sometimes it is isolated from other projects. When you have virtual exchange programs, virtual mobility, PolyU, for example, you engage the whole classroom, all these students into that perspective. So I would say that for individual perspective, may not be the same, but for institution and for, it's a big achievement.
Yeah, thanks for explanation. I think, term mobility seems that is a physical mobility rather than the virtual mobility. And as I agree that mobility doesn't mean 100% as an internationalization. So I think internationalization is more than mobility, to my understanding. Okay, thank you, Carla.
Thanks, MS. We have a question from our colleague, Eric. Eric's the head of the English department. Eric, are you still there? I'd rather save me some breath and you can ask your question instead of me reading it. Thank you.
Okay, hey, thanks, John. Sorry I don't have a video. Thanks for your talk. I have a question about assessment. And if you have any concrete examples, you've mentioned a few cultural competencies and maybe even related to language. What have been your experiences regarding pre-test and post-tests and the reporting of results and maybe even statistics to kind of argue for what has actually been achieved in either internationalization, mobilities, or COIL programs that you have been familiar with?
Right. Thank you very much for the question. Actually, when you develop the program, the COIL program, you are going to design the whole program and the plan in which you are going to address all the learning outcomes that you wish your students are going to develop.
Yeah, I've done COIL many times since 2014, actually. So I wanted if you have any assessment tools or approaches that you have used before.
Yes, Darla Dirdov, for example, she has lots of examples, and I can provide you that later if you want. They have the indicators because we have the competencies to be developed and we have the indicators. So you have the pre-test and then you have the post-test, and then you have all the indicators connected to intercultural competencies, international perspectives. And these indicators, they express exactly what you want to be achieved, what you plan, and of course, how we were going to develop that or plan in terms of the activities to enhance students' development as the professor way, but there are some cases as well. But yes, there's a list of indicators and you can find that connected to each one of the competencies. But of course, for each discipline, for each curriculum, for each program, there's a different perspective. There's no one fits all method because in the programs, they have different perspectives on internationalization and different goals and approaches as well. And for each course that compose the whole program as well. So competence, but yes, there is even a toolkit, but there are many indicators like language consistency, language proficiency, as we are talking about language. If the student is able to communicate and express himself, and then there's a list of that, and I should definitely provide.
Okay, thanks a lot for that question and answer. Does anyone else would like to jump in with your own question here? I always force myself to wait longer online. So it's tricky. It's interesting what you had to say about Hong Kong, that like, you said, oh, well, mainland students can come here and have a cultural difference, and it's like, I lived in Korea for a long, long time. And then when I moved here, I thought, well, I'll just be able to, it's another Asian culture. It's not the same, of course, but relatively simple adjustment. But it was actually quite different, and then like you kind of, we always do this game where, oh, these two things are relatively similar from my perspective, but not from that person's perspective. So it's okay. We have a thank you in the chat from Eric. So thank you. So let's any last questions or any other points?
If you allow me, I
would
like to show what you answered. When I asked why is internationalization important for you. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the answers were learning from others, and this is quite important. Internationalization is important for global, and I imagine this is global perspective, scholarship, duty, intercultural, teaching, learning, citizenship. So that's wonderful to see how connected we are. Of course, that I was just talking about the whys of internationalization before, but this makes a lot of sense. And so if internationalization is important for you, we should address this topic into our curriculum, into our teaching practices and all that, because otherwise we are not, I would say, fulfilling our mission in terms of educators, because if these competencies are going to be required and students have to develop, we are the ones who have to provide the means for them.
Yeah, I think you were right too, that it's kind of interesting. You talk about where you're from and that you need to internationalize in a certain way, and Hong Kong's different. But it's funny, like we seem like we're an international city, and I've lived here quite a while, and it feels that way to me. But then the Chinese, I'll just say it from the Chinese colleagues' perspective, just to kind of, and they always say, oh, Hong Kong's not really an international city. The people always tell me that, and it's funny. Because like they say, well, it's actually very local once you kind of leave certain locations and whatnot, and you can understand that. So a lot of our challenges seem to be the same.
You know that this internationalization of the curriculum movement in Australia, and I had the opportunity to go to Australia, which is, wow, that's quite internationalized. Some higher education institutions and universities in Australia, they have more than 60% of international students enrolled. So in the cohort, imagine 60% is quite international. Majority of students are international, but they faced this problem because international students, they would gather together and they would be in separated, isolated groups, and they wouldn't, I would say, share and learn from others with others. And so that's a key point as well. I've mentioned that it's not, if you have lots of international students in your campus, and that's why mobility is not for itself the end for internationalization. You can have lots of international students in your campus, but your students are not developing the competencies.
I want to check in a bit. I agree with these things. That's the reason why we need to have an internationalization, actually mingle students with different backgrounds, not just put the students together. Even our students go abroad to have a outbound exchange program. If they go there, they form their own circle, Hong Kong circle. They really cannot have internationalization. And we wisely that in Hong Kong, even we have students from different countries, we need to have a special arrangement for them, not to let them form their own small circles. That cannot facilitate real internationalization and intercultural learning process. Yeah, thank you for bringing this out. Very important for all of us.
Thanks, MS.
Mhm.
Okay, we have time for one more, but I won't push things too much. If anyone wants to jump in, please do. Okay, thank you for your thank you note to me. Okay, well then why don't we call it a day? I think if I'm correct, we'll see you again next year, Dr. Cassol. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'll be with
Okay.
you, and any one of you who would like to connect with the team. MS is, I'm just telling by him, on behalf of MS,
Yes,
we
please.
are at your disposal, and connect with the team, because internationalization, as we mentioned, is quite important. And some people do know the importance, but don't know how to start and how to do. We can help that. And we have a whole range of tools and tips and mentoring and, resources to provide the ways and the means.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Before we conclude, I think yes, that's important. If you can refer to our website that lists before, and also would like to have more collaborations among PolyU colleagues, and then we can use our expert color to help you to facilitate your internationalization of your own curriculums and some activities you want to organize. Okay, so that in the coming workshop next year, around the mid of next year, we will meet again and have some more sharing of real examples and experiences. Thank you.
Thanks, MS. Thank you, Carla. All right. Good luck, everybody, and Merry Christmas.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining, Carla, again. And our teams facilitate these preparations, or like Percy, Cuthbert, and be back. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.